My name is Bono, and I live in one of the most luxurious neighborhoods of the city, an address that whispers wealth and status. But behind the tall walls of this grand house lies a tale woven with betrayal, regret, and a haunting realization that I may have destroyed my own life with my own hands. It all began a decade ago. I was 25 when I decided to marry for love, or at least what I thought was love. I went against my parents' wishes and refused to marry my cousin Khalid, the man I had been engaged to since childhood. Khalid, though kind-hearted and loyal, belonged to a lower middle-class family just like mine. His home, like ours, lacked luxuries, comforts, and even basic conveniences. I, on the other hand, was desperate to escape the suffocating walls of my house. I didn't just want to survive, I wanted to live. My dreams were big. I had just completed my intermediate studies and was eager to find a job, but my parents had other plans. Complete your graduation first, then marry Khalid. I resisted. I begged them to let me work. I cried in front of my father, who remained stubborn and unyielding. Left with no choice, I enrolled in a graduation program and spent the next few years juggling my studies and arguments. When I finally held my degree, my desire to work reignited. But my father brought Khalid and his mother to our home with boxes of sweets. They were ready to finalize the wedding. Khalid handed me the sweets, his eyes glowing with love. But my heart filled with dread. I didn't want this. I didn't want him. I threw the box aside and told him flat out, I don't want this marriage. I want to work. Khalid was visibly hurt, but still calm. He said if working was what I wanted, he would let me pursue a job after our marriage. But I was adamant. After marriage, women get trapped with household chores and children, I told him. I want to live first, then marry. He was silent for a while, then finally said, all right, I'll talk to your father. I'll convince him to delay the wedding by a year. In the meantime, you can work. And he did just that. I don't know how, but he convinced both our families to postpone the wedding. My father was still upset, but remained silent. That was enough. I immediately started hunting for a job. But as a fresh graduate with no experience, the world wasn't exactly waiting for me. I went from one office to another, facing rejection after rejection. Finally, a friend of mine told me about a small private office. From the outside, it looked unimpressive, but inside, it was glamorous, modern, and intimidating. I was taken directly to the boss, a man in his 50s. His name was Sabir. His sharp gaze scanned me from head to toe as I nervously sat across from him for my very first job interview. He explained that their office worked on ad campaigns, modeling shoots, and promotional projects. Hours were irregular, he warned. Sometimes we worked late into the night. Despite my father's strict rules, I didn't want to lose this chance. The pay was excellent, 50,000 rupees, a fortune for someone like me. So I agreed. Sabir wrote up an appointment letter on the spot. When I told my family, my mother seemed cautiously happy. My father, however, was enraged. But once again, Khalid came to my rescue. He promised my father that he would pick me up whenever I worked late. And just like that, I began a new chapter, one that would unravel far differently than I ever imagined. From my very first day at the office, I could sense I had stepped into a world far beyond my old neighborhood's cramped streets. The marble floors, glass panels, expensive furniture, it all dazzled me. Sabir, the boss, ran the place with quiet authority. He rarely raised his voice, but when he looked at you, it was impossible not to feel seen, even exposed. He didn't treat me like a mere employee. His compliments were never crude, but there was a warmth in his gaze that lingered too long. You carry yourself with grace, he once said while handing me a folder. Most people your age are clumsy, but you have presence. At first, I brushed it off. But over time, his small gestures, opening the car door when dropping me home, buying me coffee, asking about my dreams, began to fill a space I didn't even know existed inside me. And I began to compare. Khalid was kind, yes, but ordinary. He didn't know how to make a woman feel special. He couldn't offer me anything beyond a tiny house, a joint family, and a used motorcycle. But Sabir, he was already treating me like I was rare, expensive, desired. One afternoon, as I was arranging files in his office, he watched me for a moment before saying, "You don't belong in a small house, Bono. Women like you are meant to be celebrated, not caged." I froze. The words hit something deep inside. I didn't say anything, but I felt my face burn. That night, I couldn't sleep. His words kept echoing. Celebrated, not caged. Within weeks, he gifted me a perfume, then a handbag, then, shockingly, a car. I was stunned. Sir, this is too much. It's not a gift, he replied calmly. It's an investment in someone I believe in. No man had ever spoken to me like that. Not even Khalid, who claimed to love me. My parents noticed the changes, the new clothes, the fragrance, the spark in my eyes, but they didn't know the cause. My father began questioning me more sternly. But Khalid, he remained my shield. I, on the other hand, began drifting. I stopped replying to Khalid's messages on time. I avoided his calls. I told myself I was just busy with work, but in truth, I didn't want to hear his voice anymore. It reminded me of a version of myself I was trying to leave behind. Then came the night that changed everything. Sabir had taken me to a high-end restaurant under the pretense of a client meeting, but there were no clients. It was just the two of us, a candlelit table and a bottle of sparkling juice. I know why you haven't married Khalid, he said, looking into my eyes. I swallowed hard. Why? Because you were never meant for small things. I felt a rush of danger, excitement, confusion. He reached out slowly and touched my hand, gently but firmly. Let me give you the life you deserve, Bono. Something in me gave in that night. I let him hold my hand. I let his words seep into my bones. Later that week, I told him everything about Khalid, my parents, the postponed wedding, and Sabir didn't flinch. I'll come to your house, he said. I'll ask for your hand properly. And he did. He came with dignity and boldness, but my father threw him out. That night, my heart was thundering. My father locked me in my room. My mother wept silently. Khalid came rushing, tried to talk to me. I didn't open the door, and the next morning, I did what no daughter should ever do. I ran away. I married Sabir. In one day, I left behind my parents, my childhood, my reputation, and Khalid. I stepped into Sabir's mansion like a queen. I thought I had won. But destiny was just starting to play its real game. The day I entered Sabir's mansion, I felt like a queen in a fairy tale. Marble floors, velvet curtains, chandeliers, and a walk-in closet filled with designer clothes I hadn't even asked for. Every detail screamed wealth. And for a few weeks, maybe even a couple of months, I lived in a daze of luxury. Sabir treated me like a trophy, showered me with gifts, kissed my forehead when leaving for work, and promised to fulfill my every dream. I posted pictures on social media, new dresses, candlelight dinners, shopping sprees. My former friends sent heart emojis and envious comments. They didn't know the price I had paid, and I didn't realize yet that the price was only beginning to be collected. Very quickly, the illusion began to crack. Sabir was always busy, early mornings, late nights, sometimes trips to other cities without notice. At first, I assumed it was just his workload. After all, powerful men had responsibilities, right? But the loneliness started to dig into my skin. He didn't talk much. He didn't touch much. He didn't see me the way he once did. I would wake up alone, spend the day alone, eat dinner alone. Sometimes I would hear the sound of my own heels on the marble floors and feel like I was echoing through a mausoleum. My heart, once bursting with excitement, now felt hollow. One night, I tried to talk to him. I wore his favorite color, sprayed the perfume he once gifted me, lit candles in our room. Sabir, I said as he entered, I feel like I don't even know my husband. He barely looked at me. I had a long day. Do you still love me? I asked, my voice shaking slightly. He sighed. Don't start. And just like that, the conversation ended. I felt like a fool. As time passed, I stopped dressing up. I stopped hoping. I tried distracting myself. Shopping, movies, visiting parlors. But even those pleasures turned into routines. Who was I dressing for? Who was I trying to impress? Eventually, I said what I thought might heal everything. I want to have a child. He looked at me like I had insulted him. A child? Bono, I don't want responsibilities. I'm too old for that drama. But we're married, I said, my voice trembling. Isn't that part of our future? No, he snapped. My career is my child. I was speechless. I realized then he never saw me as a wife. I was a symbol, a possession, maybe even a phase. The days grew darker. Loneliness now became part of my bloodstream. I started crying for no reason. I even dialed Khalid's number once. When he answered, I didn't speak, just listened to his breath. Bano, he said, voice stiff. I'm getting married next week. Please don't call again. He hung up. I cried like a child. For the first time in years, I felt what true loss meant, not just of a person, but of myself. Then came the final blow. A friend of Sabir's, half drunk at a party, leaned toward me and whispered, "You're his second wife, right? His first family lives out of town, 4 kids, I think?" My blood ran cold. I confronted him that night. "Do you have a first wife?" He didn't deny it, didn't even blink. "Yes, she lives in another city." "You married me without telling me." "I don't owe you explanations," he replied coldly. You got what you wanted, money, status. Don't pretend to be a saint now." That night, I locked myself in my room and cried for hours. My palace had no king, my marriage had no love, and my dreams had no future. I had run from one prison only to walk willingly into another. But I wasn't ready to break. Not yet. Because life was about to introduce me to someone. Someone who would change everything. I began to spend hours sitting in the garden, staring at the flowers that bloomed without meaning. The mansion that once made me feel like royalty now felt like a tomb. My world was silent. No children, no laughter, no one to call my own, just walls, perfumes, and an absent husband. My heart was wilting like the roses that hadn't been watered in days. Then, one warm afternoon, I heard a voice from beyond the gate. "Alms, please, Is, for Allah's sake." It was the soft but firm call of a young man, one I hadn't heard before. I peeked through the window and saw him, tall, fair-skinned, with striking hazel eyes. He couldn't have been more than 27, but he wore torn clothes and carried a weathered bag slung over his shoulder. His cheeks were sunburnt, his hands calloused. Yet there was a grace in his posture. He looked nothing like the other beggars who passed by. Something about him stopped me. I took 100-rupee note and walked to the gate myself. As I handed it over, his fingers brushed mine and I looked into his eyes. For a moment, I forgot who I was. He wasn't just handsome. He was mesmerizing. "May Allah bless you," he said, his voice gentle. I watched him walk away. That night, I couldn't sleep. His face kept returning to me, the sadness in his eyes, the quiet strength. It shook something deep within, a memory of innocence I had long buried. The next day, I waited near the garden around the same time, and sure enough, there he was again. This time, I gave him more. I asked, "Why are you begging? You look strong enough to work." He hesitated, then replied, "No education, no job. I have 3 younger sisters to feed. My parents are old. No one will hire me without a degree." I nodded slowly, pretending not to feel the strange ache in my chest. "I'll help you," I said. "Why?" he asked, surprised. "Because once I too was desperate for a chance." And just like that, it began. Every day at the same time he came. Every day I waited. And every day I found myself giving more than just money. I gave him my attention, my words, my presence. He told me his name was Shahzad. He was always respectful, always careful. But I could feel it, the tension, the electricity. I would glance at his arms when he wasn't looking, wonder what his hair might look like if it were clean. He was rugged, raw, real. Unlike Sabir, who wore masks of power and wealth. One day I said, "Come inside. Have a glass of water." He hesitated. "No one's home," I added softly. He stepped in. My heart pounded as I led him to the drawing room. I poured the water myself, sat across from him, watched him drink. His throat moved as he swallowed, and I caught myself staring. Your clothes, I said. They're too worn. I bought something for you. He looked startled. You didn't have to. I wanted to. I handed him a neat folded set of clothes. He opened the bag and stared at it as if he were holding treasure. Then he looked at me. Why are you doing this? I smiled faintly. Maybe because I'm more broken than you. He was silent. His eyes softened. Take a shower. Wear these, I whispered. He obeyed. And when he stepped out minutes later, clean, refreshed, dressed, he looked like a prince who had shed his disguise. I felt warmth rise to my cheeks. I circled him slowly, sprayed a little perfume near his collarbone, and laughed quietly. You don't look like a beggar now. But just when I was about to ask him to sit, he said something that froze my blood. I'm not a beggar, Bono. I blinked. What? I'm your husband's stepson. And in that moment, the ground beneath my feet shattered. I stood still, staring at him. Shahzad, the man I had invited into my home, whose presence had begun to stir forgotten desires inside me. His words echoed in my ears like a cruel thunderclap. I'm not a beggar, Bono. I'm your husband's stepson. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The room felt smaller, heavier. What did you just say? I asked, my voice barely audible. I'm Sabir's stepson, the son of his first wife, the woman he betrayed. His tone was calm. Too calm. It made my stomach churn. He sat down slowly, like someone who had carried this truth for far too long. Let me tell you who your husband really is. And then he unfolded the story, piece by piece, like tearing away a beautiful painting to reveal the rotting wall beneath. His mother was once a powerful, independent woman. She owned a well-established business, inherited after her husband passed away. Sabir was just an employee, charming, sharp, smooth with words. He won her over with flattery and fake sincerity. Within a year, she married him, trusting him with everything, the company, the accounts, the future. And like a snake, he bit her when she was most vulnerable. One by one, using forged documents, legal tricks, and manipulation, Sabir transferred her properties and business into his name. When everything was in his control, he changed. No more affection, no more masks. Then one night, he came home and simply said, "Leave. This house is mine now." His mother and her 4 children, including Shahzad, were thrown out into the streets like garbage. We had nothing, Shahzad said, his voice tightening. She begged, she pleaded. But he had connections, money, lawyers. We were helpless. I covered my mouth, tears welling in my eyes. But how do you know all this? I lived it, he said. I was 14. I saw my mother shatter. He looked at me with those same haunted hazel eyes. And ever since that day, I vowed that one day I would destroy him, not with guns or fists, but with truth. His fists clenched. I worked in factories, took odd jobs, supported my sisters, and when I had enough, I started digging into his records, his business dealings, his travels. That's when I found out about you. He paused. I knew he married again. I didn't know who you were until I saw your face the day I came begging. I recognized the sadness in your eyes. And I knew he'd ruined your life too. I staggered back, everything in my life unraveling in real time. The luxury I thought I had earned, the love I thought I had claimed, the safety I thought I had married into. It was all built on lies, on someone else's suffering. You think he loves you? Shahzad asked. He doesn't even remember what love is. You're a trophy, just like my mother was. My legs gave out, and I collapsed onto the couch. I thought back to all the days I spent alone, the cold replies, the dismissive glares. How many times had I cried myself to sleep wondering what I had done wrong? And now I knew. I was never meant to be loved. I was just his next possession. "What do you want from me?" I asked quietly, shaken to my core. He leaned forward, eyes fierce. "I want justice, but I can't do this alone." I stared at him. He was broken, but not like me. I had broken myself for luxury. He had been broken by it. "You want me to help destroy my husband?" I whispered. "He destroyed you first," Shahzad said. "Why? You just haven't accepted it yet." His words pierced deep, and in that moment I made a choice. Not because I wanted revenge, not because of Shahzad, but because I finally saw the truth. Sabir never loved me. He used me. And I would no longer let that go unpunished. After Shahzad left that day, I sat in the silence of my mansion and let the truth wrap around me like barbed wire. Every room, every item of gold or silk, every expensive thing I had once cherished, now looked like it was bought with someone else's blood, with his mother's tears, with my soul. I had once believed I was smart, ambitious, independent. But all I had done was trade love for illusion. And I had chosen the wrong man. The next day, I opened Sabir's wardrobe, not to touch his suits or smell his cologne like I once did, but to search. And search I did, like a woman possessed. I flipped through drawers, opened files, scanned envelopes, and then, bingo. A hidden folder tucked beneath winter sweaters. Inside, contracts, property documents, multiple ID cards and different names. Foreign bank statements. All of it screamed fraud. That night, when Sabir returned home, I smiled at him for the first time in weeks. I served him dinner, poured his drink, and pretended nothing had changed. But inside me, a war had begun. The next morning, I met Shahzad again. We sat in a cafe far from the city, away from Sabir's eyes. I handed him the folder, my hands trembling. He flipped through the pages, his eyes darkening with every document. "This is enough to start," he whispered, "but we'll need more. Digital trails, bank access, communication logs." "I'll get you everything," I replied. For the next 2 months, I played the most dangerous role of my life. I was the obedient wife, the sweet, apologetic woman who acted as if her world revolved around her husband. But behind the act, I became his shadow, watching, memorizing, copying. Whenever he left his phone unattended, I sent copies of files to my email. I took pictures of safes, passwords, USB drives. I installed a tracking app on his tablet, and every week I met Shahzad. We spoke in whispers, sat in quiet parks, passed each other flash drives like spies. Yet something else was happening too. Our eyes lingered longer, our silences grew heavier. I noticed how his jaw tightened when he spoke about his mother, how he clenched his fists when I described my loneliness. He noticed the way my voice softened when I said his name, how I exhaled when he looked at me with something like admiration, or was it longing? We never said anything aloud. We couldn't. It was too soon, too wrong. But in those moments, beneath the pain, we found pieces of each other. One night, while passing me a bag filled with scanned legal evidence, he said softly, "Well, you don't deserve to live like this." I smiled bitterly. "I chose it." "No," he replied. "You were promised love and given a cage. That's not your fault." His words felt like balm on a wound I had forgotten to tend to. Weeks passed. The file grew thicker, the evidence stronger. Shahzad reached out to a legal contact he trusted, an ex-lawyer, now turned whistleblower. Together, they began preparing a case. And just when we thought we were almost ready, something happened that shook me again. I found a photograph in one of Sabir's locked drawers. It was of Shahzad's mother. She was young, smiling, glowing. On the back, in Sabir's handwriting, were the words, "Never again." I stared at the photo, confused, terrified. Who was she really to him? What had he done beyond what we knew? Had he hurt her? I rushed to Shahzad the next day and showed him. His face went pale. "I've never seen this picture before," he murmured. This isn't just about property, Bono. There's more." "What do you mean?" "My mother always said there were things she could never tell me. Things too dangerous." Suddenly, our mission felt even more fragile. We weren't just fighting a con man. We were fighting someone who had erased lives, rewritten stories, and buried truths so deep they were only now beginning to rise from the grave. And yet, in all that darkness, Shahzad and I stood together, not as lovers, not yet, but as two betrayed souls, preparing to set the world on fire. After finding the photo of Shahzad's mother, something shifted in both of us. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about dignity, about restoring the honor stolen from a woman who had once trusted a monster with her life. Shahzad barely spoke for 2 days after seeing the photo. He stared at it again and again, as if trying to understand a hidden message in her eyes. "She was so young," he whispered once, barely audible. "And so proud." That's what he took from her first, her pride. It was in those moments, while sitting across from him in silence, that I saw him not just as the son of a broken woman, but as a man fighting to rebuild a history that had been stolen. His quiet strength, the way his hands trembled only when talking about his mother, the rage he kept buried beneath his calm, all of it drew me in, and I knew I was falling, but I couldn't let it show. We had work to do. Through Sabir's phone, I discovered more. Conversations with shady businessmen, invoices from shell companies, payments made under false names. The trail was dirty and long, but I was careful, always copying, never deleting, never alerting him. Shahzad compiled it all into a digital dossier. He worked late nights with his legal contact, building a case strong enough to not only arrest Sabir, but permanently ruin him. "We're almost there," he said one night as we sat in a dim tea shop outside the city. I looked at him, then looked away. "And after that?" He paused. "After that, I guess we live." I smiled softly. "Do you think that's possible? For people like us?" He stared at me for a long time. "We've already lost everything, Bono. What else is there to fear?" That night, I went home with a strange ache in my chest. I stood before the mirror in my silk nightgown looking at myself, not as Sabir's wife, not as a woman wrapped in gold, but as someone waiting to be seen. Truly seen. My mind wandered to Shahzad, his voice, his hands, the fire in his eyes. I touched my lips and whispered into the silence, "You're the only man who's ever made me feel alive." But just as I let myself dream, the nightmare returned. 3 days later, Sabir returned from a sudden trip. He was quieter than usual, his movements slower, his glances sharper. Something was wrong. Then that evening, while I was in the kitchen, I heard a loud crash from the study. I rushed in. Sabir stood there, his face pale, his hands trembling. He was holding my phone. The screen glowed with an open message from Shahzad. "Tomorrow, meet me near the court. It's time." My blood turned to ice. His eyes met mine. "Who is Shahzad?" I tried to speak, to lie, to stall, but he already knew. In seconds, he crossed the room and slapped me, hard. I stumbled back, my lip bleeding, my heart racing. "You think I didn't know something was off?" he hissed. "You've been playing games with me?" I didn't answer. My silence was louder than a scream. He grabbed me by the arm and pulled me close. "You don't know who you're messing with, Bono. I've buried people for less." And then he smiled, a cold, soulless smile. "You want to play with fire?" he whispered. "Watch how it burns you first." He locked me in the bedroom, took away my phone, my laptop, even the landline. I was a prisoner in my own golden cage. And outside somewhere in the city, Shahzad was waiting, unaware, unprotected. But I wasn't done yet. I wouldn't let it end this way. The bedroom door clicked shut behind me with a finality that felt like death. I paced like a caged animal. My lip was still bleeding from the slap, but the sting was nothing compared to the fear crawling up my spine. Sabir had seen the message. He knew Shahzad's name. And if I didn't act fast, he would reach him before the truth could. I tried to open the window, jammed. I banged on the door, nothing. I screamed, hoping the guards might hear me. No one came. He had planned this. Sabir had turned the entire mansion into a prison, just as he had turned my life into one years ago. But he underestimated one thing. I wasn't that naive girl anymore. Hours passed. My throat dried from shouting, my eyes burned. Then, as the sky outside turned orange with sunset, I noticed something. The air conditioning vent near the ceiling. Not big enough to crawl through, but maybe big enough for a voice. I pulled a chair, climbed up, and screamed through the vent. Fatima, I cried, my housemaid, the only one Sabir might have forgotten. Fatima, are you there? Silence. Then, a gasp. Baji? Listen carefully, I whispered. Sabir has locked me in. He knows everything. I need you to call this number. Right now. His name is Shahzad. Tell him not to come here. Tell him to run. I gave her the number twice, then slid down and collapsed on the bed, praying she wouldn't betray me. Minutes passed, then hours. I had no way of knowing if she'd done it. No way of knowing if Shahzad was even alive. But at midnight, I heard the lock click. The door creaked open. I froze. But it wasn't Sabir, it was Fatima, her eyes wide with terror. He's gone for him, but I called, I swear, the boy's coming for you. I grabbed her hands. Get me out. She led me through the servants' corridor, out the back gate, through the garden, and into the street. I had no phone, no ID, nothing but the night air and the pounding in my chest. Then I saw him. Standing under the streetlight, eyes searching, Shahzad. I ran. He saw me and ran too. When our bodies collided, I collapsed into him, sobbing. He held me, tightly, protectively. For the first time in years, I felt safe. I whispered. I know, he said. She told me. I looked up at him, my face streaked with tears, my voice barely holding. He knows. He's dangerous. I don't care. He took my hand. We go now. We finish this tonight. We drove in silence to his apartment. A small, dim place, nothing like the mansion I had left. And yet it felt more like home than anywhere I'd ever been. Inside, I finally broke down. I told him everything. How I lied, manipulated, played Sabir's wife to get the evidence. How I had almost lost myself in the process. Shahzad sat across from me, his face unreadable. Then he stood, walked over, and knelt before me. I hated you at first, he whispered. I thought you were just like him. But you're not. He reached for my hand. You're brave, you're broken, but you're